Greetings everyone, and thanks for joining us on this paranormal pit stop. Tonight, we'll be exploring a popular public expanse placed just off the west end of St. Anthony Falls on the Mississippi River that's located off of Portland Avenue South out of downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that's purposed in the interpretation of the history of flour milling through the region, preserving a handful of authentic abandoned flour mills and rumored to harbor a string of restless spirits tied to its past. Are you sure you're ready to brave the history and hauntings of the iconic Mill Ruins Park? Historically, in 1837, treaties set under the United States government and the Dakota Ojibwe would open the eastern bank of the Mississippi for settlement, after which one Franklin Steele would claim the eastern banks and corresponding water rights to the falls. In 1849, Steele would plat the town of St. Anthony and would construct a mill and dam along the river, and as the population boomed, by 1855, St. Anthony would boast a populace of 3,000, a huge step up from the humble 300 documented just 7 years prior. Conversely, opposite the falls, land along the western banks would act as part of Fort Snelling until 1852, when settlers were finally allowed to establish claims there. And in 1853, one Robert Smith would purchase the whole of the western banks under the same intentions as Steele. Here, the town of Minneapolis would develop, and by 1856 would boast a populace of over 1,500. Subsequently, the same year, both Smith and Steele would settle into joint stock corporations in an effort to further develop their water power separately and yet in support of each other, with a group headquartered east of the falls referred to as the St. Anthony Falls Water Power Company, and a group to its west as the Minneapolis Mill Company. Under their guidance, as many as 16 sawmills would line the falls and Mississippi on both shores, and while both communities would continue to grow and expand, eventually Minneapolis would do so more rapidly, and in 1873 the towns would be merged into one under the moniker of the larger at the time being Minneapolis. Notably, this river stretch would also be recognized as the most significant milling operation in the country, and from the 1860s and onward, as sawmills were swiftly replaced by flour mills, by 1880 around 27 local mills were working together to produce over 2 million barrels of flour annually. Incidentally, Minneapolis would be recognized as the flour center or the flour milling capital of the world, a title it would actually proudly tote until 1930, when most flour production was either outsourced or handled under massive corporations overseas. While massively profitable, as with all industries, eventually a majority of the mill sites would face closure, after which said sites were either sold off and transformed for other uses as historic buildings, or sadly allowed to fall into ruin. Through the 1980s, a slew of archaeological investigations of the St. Anthony Falls Historic District would result in the establishment of Mill Ruins Park, in an effort to preserve the should-be significant remains. Later, through the 1990s, interests would shift their sights to fully exposing and transforming the ruins for interpretive value, and in 1998, excavations were started and would last through 2001 when the expanse was finally open to the public. In the present, Mill Ruins Park remains open, offering plentiful space dotted with both walking and bike trails, which in turn pass by no less than 20 flour mills and various other industrial structures, and 2 stone piers and a handful of iron girder piers that once accommodated a Minneapolis Eastern Railroad trestle. Chillingly, Mill Ruins Park and the surrounding landscape are no stranger to ghost stories and reports of supernatural phenomena, with legends associated to the site stretching back to literally the mid-1800s, and those braving its bounds have reported extreme cold spots and odd breezes that pick up in adverse or calm weather, disembodied voices detected from various structures, and phantom footsteps that seemingly stalk the living. One early and still popular legend tying itself to the falls directly stretches back to the 1850s, when it was recognized as the Indian legend. Incidentally, this possibly native, possibly settler fabricated fable tells of a young woman who once resided near, whose husband took a second bride, resulting in his first grabbing their child, jumping in a canoe, and rowing them both over the falls to their deaths, all while the husband watched in horror from the banks. To date, several have told of sightings of a ghostly canoe spied under the moonlight that flits over the edge of the now much smaller rapids before fading into nothingness. Several informal investigations of mill ruins have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and orbs and strange silhouettes captured in the backgrounds of photography and video, while others have told of the constant feelings of being watched or being followed, of encounters with ominous shadowy figures that stalk lone walkers, of the phantom sounds of machinery heard emanating from long dormant buildings, of abnormal battery death rates, and of run-ins with a range of full-bodied apparitions in clothing stretching back centuries. In 1874, the first Washburn A mill, which was created under Cadwallader C. Washburn, was actually declared the largest flour mill in the world upon its completion. Like something out of a Final Destination flick, on May 2nd of 1878, a single spark would ignite flour particles in the air, resulting in an explosion that demolished the plant and killed 18 workers instantaneously, in an ensuing blaze that killed 4 more, and in the horrific event being recognized as the Great Mill Disaster. When all was said and done, Minneapolis's massive milling capacity would be reduced by an entire third resulting, and while the Washburn would be reconstructed 2 years following in 1880, sadly, after over a century of service in 1991, it too would face the same fate, and would be razed to the ground in a fire. Today, the remains of this weathered mill site now hosts the Mill City Museum, and a number of related, timeless, and authentic artifacts. Not surprisingly, the whole of this museum is rumored to harbor ghosts both tied to said artifacts, and also to those lost in the disaster so long ago, and both staff and visitors to its bounds have reported disembodied screams, the sickening smell of burning flesh, unnatural hot spots, and run-ins with charred and ghoulish-looking entities. On a closing note, and as if things couldn't get any worse, through the 1950s, the construction of a lock and dam through the area would result in the decimation of what was previously recognized as Spirit Island, which had acted as a significant burial grounds for those native to the region for hundreds if not thousands of years past. Because what could possibly go wrong with that, right? Ever since, it's rumored angered spirits resulting roam the expanse, especially after sundown, forever seeking out those who might have been related to the destruction of what was supposed to be their eternal home, and some even speculate the whole of this area may now very well be cursed. Thanks for tuning in for this Paranormal Pit Stop. If you enjoyed hearing our histories and ghost stories, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share us with anyone you feel could use a good scare. We'll catch you all next time.